At a family gathering, I laid bare my cheating wife's secret. No wine tonight, darling? Or is it because you're still on antibiotics for gonorrhea from your little cruise? The words had barely left my mouth when my daughter shattered my expectations with a revelation of her own. The dining room glowed with a warm golden light, the kind that should have made everything feel cozy and familiar. Instead, it cast a stark clarity on the hidden truths lingering in the air. Seated at the head of the table, I felt like the leader of a family I once believed I understood completely. To my right sat my wife, Rachel, her delicate hands resting neatly in her lap, her smile brittle and forced. Opposite her, our daughter, Emma, toyed with the stem of her wineglass, her expression unreadable. "Shall we toast?" I asked, lifting my glass with an exaggerated sense of ease. The room filled with polite laughter, but beneath the surface, my heart pounded like a war drum. This wasn't a toast to celebrate anything. It was the opening move in a carefully planned confrontation. I had uncovered Rachel's infidelity, and tonight was the night I would force her to face it. To outsiders, our life appeared picture-perfect. Rachel and I had the kind of marriage that turned heads at social events. She was effortlessly elegant, charming in a way that made people gravitate toward her. I had built a successful career as a senior partner in an investment firm, earning enough to provide a luxurious townhouse in Kensington and the best private education for Emma. From the outside looking in, we had it all. But I've learned that appearances can be deceiving. It began with little things, small shifts that were easy to brush off at first. Rachel started spending more time away from home, always with an excuse. An art exhibit, a late-night meeting with a gallery client. Her work had always been a passion, but lately, even when she was physically present, her mind seemed elsewhere. The warmth in her laughter had dulled, turning into something rehearsed, something meant to cover up whatever it was she didn't want me to see. I wasn't the only one who noticed. One night, as Emma and I set the table for dinner, she hesitated before saying, "Mum's been acting weird lately." She cast a glance toward the hallway, where Rachel was deep in yet another whispered phone call. "Do you think she's okay?" I answered too quickly. "She's fine." But in truth, I wasn't so sure. Rachel had become secretive. Her calls always ended the moment I walked into the room. The phone that once sat unattended on the kitchen counter was now guarded like classified information. When I finally asked her about it, she laughed, waving me off with a dismissive, "Work stuff, darling. Nothing you'd be interested in." Maybe I would have let it go if not for the gnawing unease I couldn't ignore. The moment that changed everything came when Rachel casually mentioned she'd be going on a cruise. "Just a week," she said, her voice light. "Some old university friends and I have been planning this forever. You understand, don't you?" I nodded, though every instinct told me something was off. Rachel was a planner. Spontaneity wasn't in her nature. The idea of her jetting off on a last-minute getaway didn't fit. Still, I didn't argue. I convinced myself I was overthinking things. She deserved a break. But as I watched the taxi carrying her disappear down the street, I felt something strange. A mix of sadness and relief. For the first time in years, I was alone with my thoughts. Thoughts I wasn't ready to face. With Emma back at university, the house felt disturbingly empty. I drifted from room to room, trying to shake off the unease, but it wasn't long before I started noticing things that didn't add up. The first clue was a complete accident. Rummaging through Rachel's desk for a pen, my fingers brushed against something soft at the back of a drawer. I pulled it out, a scarf, but it wasn't hers. The pattern was bold and loud, nothing like Rachel's refined taste. Holding it in my hands, my mind raced. Had a friend left it behind? Or was it something else entirely? Then there was her iPad. She had forgotten it at home, leaving it on the kitchen counter. I wasn't usually one to pry, but when the screen lit up with a notification, I glanced at it. "Can't wait to see you again," the message read. The sender's name was just NP, short, vague, but the meaning was clear. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a joke, something harmless from an old friend. But deep down, I knew better. The secrecy, the absences, the hidden phone calls, it all pointed to something more. Doubt gave way to suspicion, and suspicion demanded proof. Then came the final nail in the coffin, her credit card statement. I wasn't in the habit of checking, but a gut feeling drove me to log in. Most of the charges were ordinary, groceries, gallery expenses, but then I saw it. A charge from a luxury hotel. In Venice. Nowhere near the cruise route she had given me. The illusion of our perfect life was beginning to shatter. By the time Rachel returned from her trip, I was a man caught between certainty and denial. I needed the truth. But more than that, I needed evidence, something undeniable. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. The guy was sharp and discreet, assuring me he'd have answers within a week. I handed over everything I had, the scarf, the cryptic text, the hotel receipt. Follow the trail, I told him. I need to know everything. The next few days were unbearable. Every time my phone buzzed, my pulse jumped, only to sink when it wasn't the call I was waiting for. Meanwhile, Rachel carried on like nothing had changed. She kissed me goodnight, made elaborate dinners, even suggested we plan a family vacation. Her performance was impeccable. And for a moment, I almost let myself believe her. Then my phone rang. "David," the PI said, his voice calm but firm. "You were right. I've sent the photos." My hands trembled as I clicked to open the email. And there she was, Rachel, walking arm in arm with a man I had never seen before. The images were damning, clear, unmistakable. The two of them laughing over wine at a cafe, locked in an intimate kiss aboard a gondola in Venice, slipping into the same hotel room without a care in the world. The man in the pictures had a name, Nikolai Petrov, a Russian art dealer notorious for scandal. A quick search confirmed what the investigator had already told me. Mikhailov wasn't just some random fling. He was embedded in Rachel's world, galleries, auctions, high society circles. Wealthy, charismatic, and unapologetically ruthless, he was the kind of man who took what he wanted without hesitation. But the most damning evidence wasn't in the photos. The investigator had also managed to get his hands on Rachel's medical records. Just days after returning home, she had visited our family doctor. The reason? A prescription for antibiotics. The diagnosis? Gonorrhea. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just betrayal, it was public humiliation on a level I hadn't even fathomed. My wife of 25 years had thrown everything away. Not just for another man, but for an affair so reckless it had put both of our health at risk. As I stared at the evidence, fury boiled inside me. But I didn't explode, not yet. No, a simple confrontation wouldn't be enough. Rachel had spent months, maybe years, carefully weaving her lies. I would unravel them just as meticulously. And I knew exactly when and where to do it. The dining room was perfectly staged for what was to come. A long oak table stretched between us, adorned with Rachel's finest china and fresh flowers. A picture of elegance masking the storm brewing beneath the surface. The occasion? Emma's return from university, along with Rachel's parents visiting from France. On the surface, it was a warm family gathering. But for me, it was the perfect setting to expose the truth. Rachel was in her element, chatting away with her parents, effortlessly slipping into discussions about an upcoming gallery opening. Emma, meanwhile, sat quietly, absently pushing her salad around her plate. Her focus was elsewhere. I studied Rachel closely. Every charming smile, every well-timed laugh. It was all a carefully crafted performance. But tonight, I was going to tear down the curtain. As the main course was served, I picked up my glass, letting the crystal catch the light for just a second longer than necessary. "A toast," I announced, my voice steady, deliberate. All eyes turned to me, waiting. "To family," I said, pausing just long enough to let the weight of my words settle. "And to honesty." For the briefest moment, Rachel froze. A flicker of tension passed over her face before she forced a smile and lifted her glass. "To family," she echoed, her voice smooth, practiced. I let the silence stretch, thick and heavy. Then I turned to her. "No wine tonight, darling?" I asked, my tone light. "Or is it because you're on antibiotics?" Her hand jerked slightly, the clatter of her fork against the plate slicing through the silence. Across the table, Emma's gaze snapped to her mother, confusion flickering in her eyes. "I'm sorry," Rachel said, her voice unnaturally tight. "What are you talking about, David?" Leaning back in my chair, I let the moment breathe. Let it suffocate her. "Antibiotics for gonorrhea," I said, each word slow, deliberate. "From your little romantic getaway with Nikolai Petrov." The reaction was instant. Rachel's parents gasped in horror, their faces a mix of shock and disgust. Emma dropped her fork, her expression shifting from confusion to outright disbelief. And Rachel, who had spent years perfecting her composure, fell apart in an instant. "David, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not here." "Why not here?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Isn't this the perfect time to discuss how my wife of 25 years threw everything away? How she risked not just our marriage, but our health, for some cheap affair with a man I've never even met?" Tears streamed down Rachel's face as she buried her head in her hands. Her parents demanded explanations, their voices an angry blur. But then, just as the chaos reached its peak, Emma's voice cut through it all. "Stop it!" she shouted, her voice shaking, thick with emotion. She shot up from her chair, the screech of wood against tile sending a jolt through the room. "You're not the only one with secrets, Dad." The words hung in the air, suffocating in their weight. My breath caught in my throat. "What are you talking about?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Emma hesitated, her eyes darting between Rachel and me. For a second, it looked like she might back down. But then, she took a deep breath and dropped the bombshell that shattered what little was left of my world. "Nikolai Petrov," she exhaled, her voice breaking. "He's my biological father." The impact was physical. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath me, like the entire room had tilted off its axis. I stared at her, uncomprehending. "What?" I managed, my voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. "I found out last year," Emma continued, her cheeks damp with tears. "I did a DNA test for a school project, and the results didn't match yours." She swallowed hard. I confronted Mom. She admitted it. Rachel's face was pale, stricken with raw panic. "Emma, please," she pleaded, her voice barely more than a breath. "Not now." "No." Emma's voice cracked as she snapped back. "I kept your secret because I didn't want to hurt Dad. But after everything you've done, he deserves to know." I turned to Rachel, gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. My entire body trembled with the sheer force of rage, betrayal, and heartbreak. "Is it true?" My voice wavered, more broken than I wanted it to be. Rachel didn't answer, but she didn't have to. Her silence told me everything. The days that followed blurred together, a whirlwind of anger, grief, and a fierce determination to make things right. Rachel's betrayal had been devastating, but Emma's revelation had obliterated everything I thought I knew about my own life. My marriage, my family, my identity. It had all been built on lies. But instead of drowning in it, I did the only thing I could. I gathered every shred of evidence, every undeniable fact, and I filed for divorce. Rachel's infidelity and the truth about Emma's paternity weren't just personal betrayals anymore. They were the foundation of my case, ensuring that when I walked away, I did so with justice on my side. And I would walk away. No more lies, no more illusions, just the truth and whatever came next. I hired the best divorce attorney in London, determined to strip Rachel of everything she had built on deception. Her attempts to negotiate were pathetic. She called relentlessly, left desperate voicemails, even showed up at my office in tears, mascara streaking down her face. "I made a mistake, David," she sobbed. "But we can fix this. For Emma's sake." I met her gaze, my voice devoid of warmth. "For Emma's sake?" I repeated, letting the words hang between us. "You mean the daughter you lied to me about for 20 years? The daughter whose life you've now shattered?" Her tears meant nothing to me. Whatever love, whatever sympathy I once had for her had long since dried up. I had already moved our joint savings into a private account, cutting her off from the funds she had so carelessly squandered. No more lavish spending. No more gallery galas or expensive getaways. And Nikolai Petrov? He received a package. One filled with photos of him and Rachel, copies of her medical records, and a single warning. Stay out of our lives or this goes public. It didn't take long for him to vanish from the gallery scene. His reputation was beyond repair, and with no financial backing, no credibility, Rachel was left with nothing but the consequences of her own choices. Months passed. One evening, I found myself standing in the garden of my new home, the crisp autumn air carrying the faint scent of fresh grass and distant rain. Beside me, Emma sat on the patio, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. Despite everything, she had chosen to stay with me. Her loyalty, her love had never wavered. "You're still my dad," she had told me the day I confronted her about Mikhailov. "That will never change." Her words had been a balm to my fractured heart. The past was beyond repair, but the future? That still belonged to us. Rachel, on the other hand, had faded into obscurity. She had tried to reach out once, leaving a voicemail laced with apologies and desperate pleas for forgiveness. I deleted it before she could finish. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of gold and crimson, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. Betrayal had torn my life apart, but it had also freed me. No more illusions, no more lies, just truth and the promise of a new beginning. As the first stars blinked to life in the twilight sky, I whispered the words to myself, letting them settle deep in my bones. From the ashes of deceit, I rebuilt a life of truth. Betrayal may break you, but it can also set you free. With that, I raised my glass to the night, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. And to you who have walked this journey with me, thank you. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.